My name's Carina Bissett. I am the co-editor of the forthcoming anthology Storyteller, a tribute anthology to the fabulous and incredible Tanith Lee. Today, we're lucky enough to have a friend and an associate of Tanith, Sarah Singleton, here to talk about Tanith and everything about Tanith. So I'm going to start out letting you know a little bit about Sarah. Sarah Singleton was born in Thornbury and grew up in rural Northamptonshire. I hope I said that right. She studied English literature and language at Nottingham University and did a master's in literature, landscape, and the environment. She has worked as a journalist on local newspapers in Wiltshire and Gloucestershire. Gloucestershire, as a features writer for magazines and as a secondary school English teacher. She is the author of 9 novels and many short stories. Now she works freelance as a writer and journalist. She lives in Wiltshire, county of stone circles and white horses. Welcome. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. Tanith Lee. I'm a late bloomer. Wasn't introduced to Tanith Lee's work until I read her in one of Terry Windling and Ellen Datlow's fairy tale collection books. And so that was my first introduction. I was in my late 20s. When did you first find Tanith? How did you first come across her work?
Well, I was something of a late arrival to her work as well. I guess it was probably in the mid to late 90s when I was already in my 30s. And like you would mention the anthology, that's how I discovered her work as well. I was reviewing a book called Night Visions, which was a collection of short stories, and it had several of Tanith's short stories in it, including one called The Tree, A Winter's Tale. And there was something about that story. It was about the quality of her writing and the fact that it was a story set in a sort of recognizably real world, but one where lots of strange and peculiar things started to intrude, that just really captured my imagination. And I thought, there was some kind of sense of recognition about it, like this is the writer I've been looking for years, and there was some kind of intellectual and emotional gelling with the way she wrote that just really sparked something in me. And so I went out and looked for some of her other work. Now, to be really honest, which says something about my prejudice and how you shouldn't judge books by the cover, I had seen her name around before. And some of those sort of early covers of some of her books, like The Birth Grave and things, had kind of put me off a little bit because I'm not particularly interested in heroic fantasy. But, that was on me for judging books by their cover because, once I discovered what her writing was really like, I was completely hooked. The first novels I went out and got were Dark Dance and When the Lights Go Out and The Blood of Roses. And Dark Dance I read first, and I just consumed it. And I was completely caught in that world of the Scarabee and their world, and the story of Rachella. Something about that kind of Gothic story with its resonances with, sort of Charlotte Bronte and Jane Eyre, and, the tenant of Wildfare Hall, the governess in the Great Dark House. But, that very contemporary setting at the same time, I just found it absolutely captivating. And when I'd finished it, which is the first time I've ever done this in my life, I just turned back to the beginning and just read it through a second time. I was just completely enthralled by this story. Likewise, When the Lights Go Out and then The Blood of Roses. And I think in some ways those remain my favorite of her novels because they were the first ones that I read. But, from that moment, I knew she was going to be a really important and influential writer for me.
That's one. So you were a writer at the time you found her. You were already writing your own books, right? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was an influence as a reader, but also perhaps as a writer. Did her work influence your work at all?
Yes, absolutely. It did, from the first time I started reading her stories, but, going on as well. The way, I think she just has a really brilliant way of conjuring up scenes, landscapes, places, people. I think she's an incredibly visually creative writer. I mean, you know, she just comes up with these kind of throwaway metaphors and similes to describe places and things that just, you know, that are like poetry. I think she's such a very talented, creative writer in that sense, that she conjures up these incredible visual, sensual worlds that you just long to inhabit and that you feel that you're inhabiting when you're reading it. And that is something that I really, you know, aspire to try and do in my own writing as well.